Chapter 71. Home. June 1994. I sold hundreds of pounds of weed, owned luxury cars, owned properties, wore expensive clothes and jewelry, used high-powered weapons, shot numerous people and got shot at numerous times before my 17th birthday. I had been in one of the most notorious prisons in America, Lawton. I had been in numerous federal prisons across America from Virginia to Oregon. I had been involved in numerous altercations. I had beaten a KKK leader. I punished a few racists, a mobster, a few snitches. I tried acid. I saw prison escapes. I saw female officers having sex with prisoners. I saw male officers having sex with female prisoners. I broke out of prison to have sex with female prisoners. I saw men rape other men. I met cartel bosses, mafia figures, lawyers, stockbrokers, Native Americans, gang leaders, West Coast and Midwest gangbangers, hitmen, bank robbers, fraudsters. I've been on prison airplanes numerous times, all before my 23rd birthday. Now I was finally home. All of my homeboys and homegirls were my age, 23, 22, 20, 24, but none had the life experiences that I had. They were all intrigued by my stories, but they were all still in the same mind frame. I swore to never return to hustling unless the Colombians, through Sophia, or the Cubans from my time in Colorado, or the Jamaicans reached out to me with a deal I couldn't refuse. I knew the end result. I saw Ratful Edmonds and his crew get sentenced to life. I saw the R Street crew get picked up on RICO charges and sentenced to life. I saw the Newton Street crew get picked up on CCE charges and sentenced to life. I knew many of these young men, so I knew my fate if I took that path once again. I knew the feds didn't play fair when they were out to get you. While I was in prison in Oregon, there was a Navy SEAL on the compound that was serving a life sentence for killing his family. He always said he was innocent and was set up by some senators that he had dirt on. His case made it to the Supreme Court and it was sent back to the appeals court for a review. He had a chance at freedom. One day the officers came and took his cellmate to the hole. No one knew why. He was an old white dude that had been in prison for over 20 years and never bothered anyone, so it didn't make any sense. The next day the Navy SEAL got a new cellmate. No one thought anything of it, but he did. He was suspicious and stayed in the cell as much as he could. He didn't even leave out to eat. After a few weeks, the new cellmate was walking up the compound towards the metal detectors. Everyone was in line emptying their pockets, and while emptying his ID fell onto the ground. The convict behind him picked it up to pass it to him. He took a look at it because it wasn't the normal IDs the convicts carried. It was different. A closer look revealed that he was an FBI agent. Other convicts began looking at the ID as he walked through the metal detector. He looked up and saw everyone looking at him and a guy with his ID in his hand. He checked his pockets and then froze up once he realized they had it. His cover was blown. The cops by the metal detectors immediately escorted him off the compound. It was also a Mexican on the compound that told me the feds dressed up as firefighters, got assigned to a fire truck, and then got someone to light a fire on the side of his house. Once they arrived, the fire gave them probable cause to enter into his house to put out the fire. They then claimed to see guns in plain view, which allowed them to get a search warrant from a judge to search the house. They then recovered a lot of contraband and used it to convict him. He was sentenced to 40 years. These two incidents opened my eyes like nothing else. An agent was posing as a convict to get information from another convict, even risking his life. An agent starting a fire, then posing as firefighters to get into your home. The feds were nothing to play with. November 22nd, 1994. Who you worship, nervous on your knees. When you say your prayer, pray for Lees. Who you worship, nervous on your knees. When you say a prayer,
Pray for Lees.
I was at my house with a few homies when my brother's beeper started beeping. "Grab my beeper for me," he yelled from across the room. My homie B. Clay beeper went off. Then Yuck's beeper went off. Then Bundy's beeper went off. Then Blow's beeper went off. We all stopped what we were doing and began looking at each other with blank stares. Then my beeper went off. What the fuck? My brother looked at his beeper and said, "Lees." I looked at mine. "Lees." Yuck looked at his. Lees hit me too. I looked at Blow, B. Clay, and Bundy and said, "Lees hit y'all too?" They all responded, "Yup." It was strange and something that has never happened. Everybody got beeped at the same time. All the beepers had the same message. 100. Code 100. Chapter 76. Beep. I was counting money, packaging the coke and weed from the yardies and Colombians, and cleaning pistols. Lees was supposed to be on the way here, but he never showed. I planned on meeting up with him later in the day anyway, so it was no big deal. He was always a quiet and humble person, but lately he seemed troubled. He was usually this way after a shootout or after laying all night on an adversary, but lately he has been in deep thought and angsty. As men, we rarely spoke about our emotional issues. It was always kept bottled up on the inside with the expectation that it would work itself out. It was no need to get others involved with our problems, because others had their own problems to deal with. All the beeps came from Benny Lee Lawson. We called him Lees, his middle name. He was a childhood friend and my brother and Yuck's co-defendant on the gun charges. He always left code 100 on our beepers, and we would automatically know the number to call back to. Or he would leave code 100 just to say, "What's up?" or "I'm good." But when it came in succession, we all looked over at each other wondering what he was up to, or if he was safe. Lees had awoken late after a long night of reading and meditating, took his time and meticulously got dressed in a tan button-up, brown leather dress shoes, a brown print sweater and a 3/4 length jacket, and got ready to head out. He stopped to message everyone that he loved. 100. 100. Under the cashmere Hugo Boss jacket, he carried a converted, fully automatic Cobra Mac 11 pistol. He had already clicked it from S, semi, to F, fully. This would allow it to shoot at least 12 rounds per second. The extended clip held 30 shots, and 2 extra extended clips were held in his front pockets. While I was beeping him to make sure he was okay, he was on the bus heading downtown. While I was weighing keys of coke and decompressing Thai weed, he was getting off of the bus at Judiciary Square, an area that is mostly occupied by various federal and municipal courthouses, office buildings, and police headquarters. "Hey, Lees ain't hit nobody back yet?" Bundy asked, to no one in particular. "Nope. I beeped him again and called his house. No answer," I replied. While I was cleaning the Kalashnikovs and the M16s, he was walking into the DC police headquarters, which is a half-mile from the White House, several blocks from the Capitol, and one of the busiest buildings in Washington, D.C., the most powerful city on Earth. The Mac 11 was tucked in his waistband horizontally with the 30-shot clip hanging vertical like scrotums. The building had no security check or metal detectors, just 2 rent-a-cops hovering in the lobby. "Good evening." "Good evening, sir," they replied, having the slightest idea that this evening would not be a good one. Chapter 78, Shift Change. Cops across America routinely disrespected, dishonored, lied, stole, killed, and were notorious for beating her citizens in interrogation rooms. They were known to routinely torture black men with impunity, frame black men to applause, kill black men and be celebrated with a bonus and paid leave. Cops in America killed upwards of 1,000 of her citizens every year, with a vast majority being unarmed, with less than 0.5% of the cops prosecuted and 0.001% convicted. Black people in America has always viewed the police with suspicion. Even if a cop was there to help, we were always wary of their presence, because the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. Armed with all of these facts, somehow their arrogance pushed them to believe they didn't need any form of security at their place of congregation, their headquarters. They believed that no one had the audacity to even think of entering a building filled with armed Gestapos with the intention to do harm. It probably never even crossed their minds that anyone would even dream of such a thing. They underestimated everyone, including people they assaulted, framed, and dishonored. The fatal mistakes of fools. Benny walked through the corridors of the large building filled with cops with the Mac 11 on his waist. He had a mission and a target. He looked into a few offices filled with FBI agents, homicide detectives, and local cops. He even asked a few detectives if they knew of the location of the officer he was looking for. He took a sip of water from a water fountain and paused to observe the hundreds of officers milling around conversing, laughing, plotting, and scheming. The stalkers were being stalked in their own backyard without an inkling of thought. A tiger was laying in the shrubs and his claws were deep into the soil, while the wildebeest mingled in his presence, sucking up dirt with their nostrils. A few of them were about to get eaten, and they wouldn't even see it coming. Benny asked another detective for an officer's name, and he told him to check on the 3rd floor. That was the last place he had seen him. Benny headed straight for the elevator. It was 3:30 p.m. Shift change. After getting pulled over and made to lay face down on the hot asphalt for no reason one night, he looked over at me and said, "For a cop to be so disrespectful, you would think they had nothing to lose." Maybe some of them felt that way, but most of them had mortgages, wives, car notes, college tuitions for their kids, dates for parent-teacher conferences, and more. Yet they acted like us, the ones with the nothing-to-lose mentality. We were young and reckless. We feared nothing and no one. We carried high-powered weapons like wallets and would use them without blinking. We didn't have wives, and most of us didn't have kids. We had no obligations, and the ones we did have, walking away from it in 30 seconds would not take a second thought. We didn't fear prison. It wasn't a deterrent. We didn't give a fuck about anything, including ourselves. A cop interrogating a suspect who didn't fear death or prison had no leverage. He had nothing to work with because his threats were obsolete. Beating on that suspect could cost that cop his job, but beating on the wrong suspect could cost that cop his life. Most had too much to lose, but arrogance could get the best of men. And coming across the best of men with not much to lose, it's best that arrogance is harnessed. It's the best act for survival. And the best men understood this. In honor we stand. In honor we die. On the elevator with Benny were 5 other cops, happy that their shift had just ended. They were looking forward to going home to their dogs, kids, and wives. It had been another rough day in the district. 5 people had been killed in the past 2 days and at least 10 wounded. Doing the paperwork and gathering witnesses for murders was exhausting. One of them spoke about quitting soon. They all had Glocks in their holsters. Benny paid them no attention. As the elevator came to the 3rd floor, he excused himself and eased from behind them. They gave him a path and friendly smiles, not knowing that a hungry tiger was just staring at the back of their necks. Not knowing they could have just got eaten. He stepped off of the elevator and slowly looked around, observing the lackadaisical atmosphere of people who had violated many innocent citizens. People who have violated many oaths. People who have violated many laws. People who have violated many killers. He then walked up and down the hallway looking for his mark. Dozens of cops and civilians were mingling and moving back and forth. He again asked a few officers and some other young men if they had seen his target, when one of them pointed to a room with the sign Cold Case Squad written on the door. Benny thanked him and headed there. He slowly walked in. The room Benny walked in was occupied with multiple homicide task force and FBI agents. They paid him no attention until he yelled out, "Y'all got a problem with me?" They stopped what they were doing only to see a fully automatic Mac 11 being pulled from Benny's waistband and his index finger massaging the clitoris. It was no more sweet talk. An FBI agent was killed instantly. Bullets ripped through his suit jacket and lodged into his chest cavity. He slumped over in his chair, blood oozing from his mouth. The rest of the officers all pulled their weapons while diving under desks and office chairs. A few ran out of the office, leaving their comrades behind. The hallway filled with officers and civilians turned into a stampede as no one could fully tell where the shots were coming from. 100 armed men and women with their arms out taking cover and inches away from killing each other. Some were running for the exits and flooding the elevators. A few stayed behind. A female officer immediately returned fire, hitting Lees in his shoulder. Another bullet hit his Mac 11, permanently disabling it. He still had 2 more full clips, but the gun was useless. The tiger lost a tooth, but he still had claws. Benny then rushed towards her so quickly that she didn't get a chance to let off another shot. He wrestled her gun away from her, a Glock 17, then dumped most of her own bullets into her head at close range. One got stuck in her tongue. She was 3 months pregnant with twins. The phone rang again before I left out of the house. "Slim, whoever went up in the Bodine headquarters is putting in major work. They dragging bodies out of there left and right. Y'all see this shit?" Hold up. I turned the TV back on. The chaos was worse. The media was giving conflicting reports and everyone was nervous. Reporters' eyes were glossy. Off-duty cops were sobbing. Civilians seemed intrigued. SWAT team members were barking orders. Downtown was shut down. All buildings evacuated. The most powerful government in the world was at a standstill. The TV report made us all stand still. We took a seat and watched in awe. This was history in the making. Bundy lit another spliff and then said, "Anybody heard from Lees yet?" Everyone shook their heads. Nope. He looked at us for a second, then went into a deep thought. Our eyes never left the screen. The phone was ringing off the hook. Every minute someone was calling to talk about it. Everyone in Washington, D.C. had stopped what they were doing to look at the breaking news. Not one person was sad. "That's what the fuck they get," one girl yelled over the phone while laughing. "Man, they out here popping bottles," was the words from another caller. "Whoever it is, they have my praises," came words from another caller.
This is a prepaid collect call from an inmate S.
Calls were coming in from D.C. jail, the feds, and Lawton. "Slim, everybody here jumping for joy. It's like their favorite team won the Super Bowl. Somebody's got my utmost respect." While listening to the phone, the news reported that another officer was killed. A homicide detective. Still holding the phone, all I heard was yelling and screaming and champagne corks popping. Everybody was in a great mood while it was reported that another brown shirt was hit multiple times in the back and neck. A teenage snitch there to collect money for informing on a case involving the murder of an Alabama senator's aide was also hit. Dozens of bullet holes pocked the walls, and thick smell of gunpowder and gun smoke were choking the reporters and witnesses. Over 50 SWAT team members were outside the door while one of them shot stunning smoke grenades into the room. The smoke grenade created enough of a diversion that they were able to grab one of the dead bodies by the legs and quickly drag him out of the room. Bullets were still coming. One shot hit Lees in his hip, knocking him down to the floor, but his trigger finger was still working, overtime. Bodies were piling up, and everyone was wondering who had the nuts to make that move. A move that most young men may have fantasized about at one point or another, after being disrespected and dishonored. Benny tried leaving the cold case squad room because he had more business to handle, but was repelled by more stun grenades and gunfire coming from the SWAT team. He was firing back with a dead cop's Glock, taking extra clips from off of the dead cop's belts. The Mac 11 was permanently disabled. It sounded like Vietnam inside of the police headquarters. After a 40-minute barrage of murder and mayhem, the shots came to an end. Benny was wounded from ricocheted shrapnel from a bullet he fired. It entered the left side of his head and lodged into his brain, killing him instantly. As the smoke cleared, 4 bodies were recovered. The room was still silent as we were all still holding our beepers for a possible response from Benny. Isn't today the same day President Kennedy got smashed by Lee Harvey? Someone asked, no one in particular. So they say, I replied. All I knew was, whoever it was that did this was not someone to be played with. It was November 22nd, 1994. I was 23 years old.